Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar dedicated to gender equity, diversity, and tech. I am really delighted to celebrate the International Women's Day with all of you. Yes, we know it's officially tomorrow, but it's never too early to speak about it. And as a CEO and the co-founder of really gender equity by design company, being here today with you is really important for me and for each person in my group. Thank you for being so numerous today. This show that this is a priority for many, and there is still a long way to go. So we need to speak up still. During these hours, we have the chance to learn a very, very, very big chance, I think, to learn to listen to great leaders who come from a range of backgrounds and experiences, share better ways to liberate our voices through really simple words, to better understand our cognitive biases as well and how to act on them. This is really important and give some tips, good ideas, and best practices to evolve the workplace and our society. So we are really happy and lucky. Really, I feel lucky to have with us three great speakers who have stood up for more equity and diversity. So I will take some minutes to introduce you quickly. First, Françoise. Dear Françoise, you're amongst the legend of the Silicon Valley and all the impressive executive positions at Google, Pinterest. You're definitely a leading figure in the fight against discrimination in the workplace and especially in the tech space. Of course, we are really honored to have you today with us. Thanks a lot and really warm welcome, Françoise. Welcome, Daniela. Daniela, you have everlasting positive energies that impressed me so much over time. You are the CEO of Moleskine after having an impressive job in big corps and led some big brands such as Diesel or Baccarat. You were the first woman to lead the regions and to lead China from Procter and Gamble. You also lived for years in Colombia, Mexico, China, France, Russia, Italy, Belgium, Venezuela, and Brazil. I'm sure the list is not enough. You're having an amazing multicultural journey that brings a lot regarding diversity and gender equity topic. So thank you being with us. And we are glad to welcome David Smith. Hello, David. You are an associate professor in the Johns Hopkins Curry Business School and also the co-author of the book Good Guys, how men can be better allies for women in the workplace. This is a huge topic. Your book is a great success around the world. You speak in a way that is quite rare in Europe. So we are really happy to have you and to have your point of view as a sociologist and as an academic as well. I'm sure that your insights will be enlightening. And last but not least, I am co-presenting this webinar with Antoine, who has been working at Numberly for years now. It is a pleasure and important having him with us today. As David says in his book, men have a very large and key role in gender equity.
Thank you very much, Iselis, and I'm super happy and honored to be with you today. And if you have some questions throughout the webinar, you can mention them in the chat window, and our speakers will answer them at the end of our session.
Yeah, do not hesitate. And you can also participate in our random draw to try to win the book Good Guys, How Men Can Be Better Allies for Women in the Workplace. So it's the co-author is with us, David Smith. To participate, you can ask a question to one of the speaker in the chat or just write your name if you don't have a question in the chat. Please include your first name and the first letter of your last name so we can find you and send you a book. So thank you. And Antoine?
Yeah, so definitely we hope that everyone will participate because this book is really great. And now we can start with our first question. So thank you very much, dear speaker, to be with us today. And so the first question is, what are you fighting for? And we can start with you, Françoise.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this webinar and learn from all of the speakers. So what I'm fighting for today, it is interesting. As Ezelise mentioned, I've been working for over 25 years in technology through Google, Square, and unfortunately Pinterest. And I always thought that I could fight for a more just place by being a role model. I'm someone that was very private and didn't put my name anywhere, didn't talk ever to the press or any kind of media. And I ended up realizing that that was not enough. That actually, even if you try to be a role model and pull people behind you, you are still going to reach what in the US we call the glass ceiling. And for me, coming up and learning about it was a hard decision, but I'm happy I did. And since then, a lot of women and underrepresented people have reached out, and I'm trying to help either through my network established in tech or just helping them articulate and telling their story. I do believe storytelling is a big part of what I'm fighting for because it brings transparency and it brings also humanity to a very specific problem.
Thank you very much, Françoise. Daniela, perhaps what are you fighting for?
I think I'm fighting against myself to make sure that I have enough energy to continue coaching. We talked many times about this, Isolis. I think at this stage of my life or my career, even if I still have an executive job, for me the most important thing is to coach men and women, boys and girls, to get the most out of diversity. I think, you said it before, I lived in so many different places. So I think the cultural experience of diversity goes beyond gender, for sure, it goes beyond men and women. It's cultural, it's ethnic, it's so much broader. And, I run a beautiful brand now, Moleskine, that I think was in its DNA, it's clearly, it's the power of creativity, of idea, of different human values. So by nature is like this, but I also think, it's in a country, which is my own country, by the way, that is not the master of diversity. So I have a lot to coach, a lot to coach of understanding how to get the best out of diversity. In P&G, and you said that there are many P&G people that used to say that diversity is a strategy, is a business strategy, go over and beyond being like right from an equality point of view. And that's not always obvious to people. You think you have to do it because you need to have X% of women, X% of this, X% of that, but the human talent, there is the best talent. There is, I don't know what, about 10% of the population in each type of gender or ethnicity or geography. So if you exclude and you have a very narrow view of what you can get, but you will get only a portion of this talent. So, there are so many good reasons to continue coach. And as I said, I fight against myself because sometimes I feel like I have no more energy. And I have a lot.
Thank you very much, Daniela. David, you're fighting what for?
Thanks, Isolis, and just great to be here with two impressive and accomplished leaders with Françoise and Daniela. So thank you for allowing me to join you today. And yeah, I think one of the things that I hear in the words of Daniela and Françoise is that been fighting for a long time for this, right? And women have made such progress. If you go back over the last 50, 60 years, there's been a lot of great progress, but much of that has been because women have found ways to adapt themselves, to adapt their leadership style, to adapt to a workplace that really wasn't designed for them in so many different ways, and have made great accomplishments. But if we're ever going to get to real gender, to finish this and to what we're fighting for and real gender equity, that we all have to be involved. And that's why I think, my co-author Brad Johnson and I argue that gender equity is not a women's issue. This is not about creating women's programs or women's leadership initiatives. This is a leadership issue, which means that it's the roles for and functions for men and for women here, for all of us to be involved, and with good reason, because again, you're all business leaders. You know that again, there's a business imperative for this. That we are losing money. We are not as efficient. We are not as creative. We're not making as much money. We're not making as good of decisions because we're not thriving with the best talent and a workplace that allows us, even for the talent that's there, to thrive in a way that really helps us to achieve what we're looking for. So we're missing out on a business opportunity here in a lot of ways. And that's, for our organizations, that's important, but for our society, that's important too, right? Because that's part of the economic engine that we need to continue to look for. And there's just, again, I'm fighting to bring men into the conversation. We need to work together with women. This is not about men rescuing or saving women. This is about learning to really work together and create a workplace where we can all thrive. And we have to be involved in that conversation if we're going to get there. And not just talking about it, but actually taking action that achieves the kind of results that we're looking for. And I think part of that is remembering that for men, that there's something in it for them too, right? Beyond their business, beyond their family and the society, that they as leaders are going to become better as they do this more. They become more collaborative and the kinds of relationships they're having in the workplace. So thank you for inviting me today.
Thank you, David, and thank you for your great engagement. I think you're right. The workplace, and perhaps especially, we will talk about it, François, the tech workplace is not designed for women, as you said. And to jump on that, perhaps Daniela, can you recall the first time you were the target of or witness of misogyny?
No, I don't. I don't. I think honestly, I never witnessed. What I witnessed sometime, and again, I was privileged because I grew up in a company like P&G that long time ago decided to make a gender diversity and diversity in general a strategy. So I think I was lucky and blessed to have leaders that were male and women and men that were really acting as leading by example. Honestly, the only thing that came to my mind when I saw the question is that sometime they were with me and maybe with other women try to be too protective. So no, I told the story of when they wanted to offer me to take the position of vice president of Eastern Europe. So I had Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and it was not typical for women to be on the front line of running regions or countries at the time. We're more into important roles, but more in business units role, not so much in the markets. And I remember after they offered me the job, my boss told me, we were several of us, and they were all men, the different bosses, and the pool of people that was making the assignment planning, and we were half of them were that they shouldn't have offered me this job because they would put me in a tough position, and the other half was okay, but we are all convinced she can do it, so we should decide for her. And at the end, I think the part of that decided we should go forward and offer me the opportunity to go with my husband and see if I could work and live there happily. That prevailed. And I learned out of this experience that we should never make decisions for women with a good intent sometimes to protect them or make sure that we don't put them in tough situation. I I didn't feel I was put in a tough situation. I think I was lucky to go there. You know, I used to be a ballet dancer in my first life, so going to Russia for me was also like the dream of my life, the Bolshoi, over and beyond PNG. So for me, it was a great opportunity, and listening to their story that they had a different point of view in the board, whether they should. I thought, you know, why you are, I don't know if that is misogyny, I think it's protectivism towards women. They can do it, they cannot do it, is they're tough, and the family and the husband and the children, and honestly, we were all very happy there. So I often think about that I shouldn't fall in the trap, or when they say, yeah, but she's a woman, we shouldn't send her to the place. I mean, let's ask her. Let's ask her if she fails, if there's not this opportunity, it's going to be another one, but let's not be too protective and make a decision thinking. In fact, I think if I didn't have that opportunity, probably I would not be the same as I am today, because I learned a lot.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Daniela. It's so true. And, thank you very much. Françoise, your first time?
Yeah, and I'm hoping you are not going to share broader than this, but I actually went to an engineering school in France where very few women went. And I remember wanted to be part of the leadership of the student association. And I had this little, like a lot of kids in France have, I had this little moped where you go to school, you park in the garage, and, you know, had it since I was probably 14. My parents gave it to me. And my moped was totally destroyed in the parking garage. And while that was not, the majority of the students were very supportive to have women in the school and to have women that wanted to take a leadership position, there was still a minority that really resented us being there because we were taking the place of other male students that could have attended the school. So I think that's the first time I realized that there was some barrier to my ambition as a woman in a field that is typically not very welcoming of women.
Thank you, Françoise. A hard way to learn, that's for sure. David, what was your first time?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the actual first time, but there were so many. So my background, I started in the military, so in the U.S. in the U.S. Navy, and at the time when I started my career in the military was in the 1980s. So percentage of women was really low. I mean, it's still low today, but it was even lower then, so less than 10%. And I think much as Francois and Daniela were articulating about their experiences and what they saw, and there was a lot of exclusion. There was a lot of resentment about why women were there, because they couldn't do the job. They couldn't do it in the same way. They couldn't do it effectively. And there was a lot of resentment toward that. And the exclusion, I thought, was just, I mean, it was psychologically damaging, I think, in a lot of ways, because it wasn't just excluded from opportunities, but not being included and not being treated as one of the same team. And so, I mean, to me, that was one of those things where it just kind of opened my eyes, because it was one of the first times in my life where I'd been around women where they weren't treated equally, and they weren't seen as being an asset in the same way that everybody else was. And so that really kind of opened my eyes to that, to recognize that, wow, this is going on out there. This is out there in the world. And the fact that, at that moment in time, I didn't know beyond my profession how far it went. But I learned, as time went on. And so, I think it's important for everyone on the call today to recognize these experiences that you're hearing, that because it helps us to gain awareness of what's going on, because this is one of the challenges around, again, I think this is a great phrase for the International Women's Day, breaking the bias, is because we don't see it, and we don't see it. And that especially for those things that we haven't experienced. And so it's really helpful to have others share that in a way that helps us develop that awareness. And it really gets it gets in touch with that sense of motivation, to make things right, to propel action. And I think, again, this is one of the things for engaging all of us to get involved, and men, is to develop some of that awareness.
Thank you very much for your testimonies and very insightful stories. Um, and as you said, David, sometimes we need to take actions. And so, to your point of view, what could help us to be more tolerant, and on the other way around, what prevents us from being more inclusive? Maybe we can start with you, Françoise.
Yeah, I think what drives us to me to be more tolerant, as if both Daniela and David talk about it, it's a business imperative. If you are, and for me in technology, your consumer or any kind of consumer, and you need to understand them to really design the right experience for them to love your product. So there is a clear business imperative. Um, and and a few people start understanding this. So that's the one of the reasons why it's important to be more tolerant. I also think if you reflect on your personal life, each of us have experienced some encounter with people that are different from us. And that's really help us being more tolerant. So at the previous question, we talk about when do you experience misogyny, but when do you experience talking to someone that was really different from you, whether it's social background, whether it's gender, whether it's country of origin, someone that disability, anything. And if all of us have one time with this experience, it just drives us to be more tolerant because we see people through a different angle that we usually do. I think what prevents us to be more inclusive is just comfort of being surrounded with people like you. And it's very comfortable to be with someone that think like you. In tech, we have this added issue of speed. So we are in an industry that, every week we develop, we do iterative, we launch things all the time, we do agile. And it's always easier to go with someone like you or to hire someone like you because there is more of them to start with versus taking the time to think, okay, I am prioritizing inclusiveness, diversity or not. So I think speed in tech, at least, is also a big factor that prevent us from being more inclusive.
Thank you very much, Françoise. David, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Francois hit a very important point there. And it's again, this developing awareness is about understanding how people who are different from us experience the workplace differently. And so for the men out there, understanding how women may experience the workplace differently and recognizing that, one woman's experience isn't necessarily the same as others, that we have to, again, understand that, around intersecting identities are important too. So women of color may experience the workplace very differently than their white female colleagues do. So I think that's an important part of it. But I think also recognizing we need more interaction, right? One of the solutions here is that we all need more interaction with people who are not the same as us, and it's not something that we naturally do. But the research is really clear. Things like intergroup contact theory and the mere exposure effect show us that in the research that the more time we spend getting to know somebody who's different from us, this is how we break stereotypes. This is how we begin to realize that that's not true at all, right? And we really begin to know somebody for who they are and not who we think they are, right? Based off of whatever identities they have. And so it's really important for that. One of the things in our research we found is we were interviewing men to try to understand how we could help them to be more inclusive and to have more of these closer professional relationships with women at work. And there was just a host of reasons why men were reluctant to have closer relationships with women at work. And there were actually so many of them, we called this the reluctant male syndrome. And it could be everything from some of these unconscious biases or implicit perceptions of that seeing women as not being strong enough, or she's a risky investment, or she's not cut out to be leader material in some way. And so understanding that they have these perceptions and how that's holding them back is important. Some men just had anxiety around having a relationship with a woman at work. They felt very comfortable because of how they were raised and socialized, maybe to have relationships with women like their mother or their sister, or today maybe their partner or a daughter. But what did it look like? What did it mean to have? What was this script I follow of relationship? How to have a relationship with a woman at work? And men said they would get anxiety. They have a lot of anxiety around that. And, if Brad were here today, he would tell you as a clinical psychologist, there's only one solution to that, and that's exposure therapy. So we need more interaction, more coffee, more lunch, more working together in doing this. And certainly, over the last 5 years or so, since the Me Too movement has really gone viral around the world, that is even exacerbated even more for men. And we continue to have these kind of conversations around in circles around men, that women are dangerous for some reason, and we take these false narratives and continue to perpetuate them, or that somehow women caused Me Too, or women are going to make false accusations, which all of that is blatantly false, and there's no evidence to support any of it. So one of these things I think is acknowledging and being able to have these conversations with each other to recognize what's holding us back and really keeping us from being the better allies here.
Thank you, David. Daniela, would you want to add something? How to be more tolerant and
I think that it makes a big difference in the approach that you have to diversity in general if you are exposed to diverse cultures, to diverse experiences. So, of course, I always tell the young people, if you have the opportunity, go and work abroad, challenge yourself to live in different places, to have the curiosity to learn what the beauty that there is in the diversity, not just gender, of course, gender, but more than that, cultural. As you can imagine, when you go to China, you find things that in their behavior, in their way of being, that you don't understand. And you can easily criticize, oh, look at this, oh, look at that. I mean, things that in Western culture are not very tolerant. We're not very tolerant of, but it's very interesting to also see their point of view. I remember I had an assistant when I worked in China. My personal assistant told me two things that made me reflect about, we need to rethink who we are. And one, she told me that Europeans, that for her, we all look the same. When she told me this, but how can you say we look the same? How can you say that guy looked the same as the other? But I remember that when I arrived to China, everybody looked the same to me. And I had a hard time to recognize one person from the other. I had a hard time to recognize a Chinese from a Japanese, from a Korean. For me, they were all the same. That as you live there, you learn that their accent, the way they speak, the way they dress, creates a difference. But you see, it's interesting to see how things mirror. For her, she told me, you all look the same. The other thing she told me once is that she recognized European because we smell. And I was like, how do you dare to say we smell? Because, at the time I went to China, there was no deodorant. Women, so the worker in the home, the driver, it was a little sometimes problem. And I was shocked that she would tell me that we European, Western, we smell. She said, excuse me, what do we smell like? You smell like milk. And, because they didn't used to drink milk. Now they do, but like 10, 15 years ago, there was no milk in China. I remember I was going to Hong Kong to buy the milk for my children. So, of course, they don't have certain, they don't digest certain things, and like they have a natural refusal to certain smells. All these made me think that, we see the world for what we are, not for what really is. And it was so interesting to see how we had opposite views. So that when people tell me something, I say, okay, we need to make an effort to really understand, not only understand, but appreciate the beauty of being diverse. Because honestly, and that's a bit the problem of how do you prevent this? Of course, if you, as Françoise would say, you were born, you grew up always in the same environment, surrounded by the same people, they speak the same way, they dress the same way, they eat the same way, they pray the same way. It's going to be tough to understand that there is something different. So I think for the younger generation, now the older one of us, when we are done. But as we coach younger people, I say, go and experience. And as a leader, honestly, of an organization and of a business, I try to bring diversity. any type of diversity in my organization as much as I can, from diversity of gender that today goes well beyond men and women, but also cultural, ethnic, which is very important. You know, it's not the passport, it's the ethnicity often that really drive the diversity. And teach people of being curious and eager to learn the beauty that there is in different cultures, religions, languages, eating habits. That's not so easy. You know, I mean, I am in an Italian organization now, and a lot of people was Italian. There were Italians everywhere. I love Italian, but in the US, we had only Italians. In China, we had only Italians or majority Italians. And I started changing a bit. I mean, I think when we speak to China, we want to hear Chinese people. When we speak to Japan, we want to hear Japanese leaders that understand and can better portray the cultural, the differences. We trying to help them also to build their business. I think it feels very different. It feels, now we start looking at what the world really looks like.
Thank you very much, Daniela. Definitely, it's a very important part. And you say, David, it's hard to fix what you can't see. You said it, and it's also in your book. So clearly, male and female misperception extends to how we differently perceive opportunity, and obviously cultural differences that you just illustrated, Daniela. It's very, very important. So we all know that cognitive biases are central in the gender and diversity problem. What are the main cognitive biases we need to be aware of and fight against? Because we are, each of us have cognitive biases. So, David, could you perhaps explain the definition of a cognitive bias and tell us more about which one you think we need to understand and fight against?
Yeah, happy to. We could spend all day on this one, unfortunately. But yeah, these cognitive bias are just, again, the perceptions that we have of others based off of information that, in many ways, it's information we take in, how we've experienced the world around us, and when we don't, we don't see, or we see people in a particular way, then we form that information, and we form these again, unconscious biases about who these people are and what they do, and we make all these assumptions. And in many ways, biases, there's a lot of biases out there in the world that are not negative. They're really designed to, the way our brains work, to help us make better decisions, to operate faster and more efficiently as human beings. The problem is we make mistakes with some of that information on occasion, and that's the challenge, and that's where these biases go against us. And so, for example, from a gender perspective, there really kind of four that we tend to focus on. There's a lot of them, but the first is around competence, and how, in many ways, women in their leadership roles and managerial roles or technical roles are not assumed or not seen as being competent. And the way this plays out, we call it it's been called the prove it again bias, where women are constantly being asked to prove their competence, or when they walk into a room, that they're not assumed to be the expert, they're not assumed to be the leader, or their competence is devalued or dismissed or belittled in some way. When you walk into a hospital and you see a woman in a white coat, you think somebody calls her the nurse, or thinks she's a staff, a helper, and she's not the doctor. All of these things, they play out in a variety of different ways, but this prove it again bias, or this not seeing women for their competence, is one of the big ones out there that underscores some of the challenges that we face in the workplace. Closely related to it is one around women's agency and being seen. So thinking about from how they lead or use power or influence. And so when women get into a leadership or managerial role, if they lead in a more stereotypically masculine way, so more directive or more assertive, then they're labeled your favorite B word. Bossy, not that other one. And if they lead in that more stereotypically feminine way, so that's more participative or collaborative, again, these are stereotypes, then they're not seen as strong leader material. She doesn't have what it takes to get to the next level. And so they face a bit of a double bind here, right? And whereas men, we get a lot more flexibility when it comes to our leadership style. And so we're not aware of how women experience this differently in the workplace. And biases like this, they lead to things like systemic inequities, like the gender wage gap, or the lack of representation of women in more senior leadership positions in our companies, because it plays out in things like performance reviews and performance evaluations, how they're evaluated. The subjective language is not valued. The words that we use to describe men and women as leaders, for women, is not valued in the same way as it is for men. And so it doesn't lead to the promotions. It doesn't lead to the pay opportunities that men get. The third one is really, around, we call them, it's the maternal wall, or the pregnancy bias, around seeing women as primarily as caregivers and as nurturers. And the minute that is associated with a woman, there's a pay penalty for that even. And so these biases play out in a lot of different ways that are holding us back from achieving the equity we're looking for. And the last one that we see is back to intersectionality, and remembering that the intersecting identities are important. And I think Daniela brought that up and highlighted that really well. That for women of color, they face very different challenges than do other women. And we see this around other cultural and ethnic intersections as well. So remembering that people are not a monolith. We have to see them for who they are and begin to really understand them, and so we can begin to understand how these biases operate.
Thank you very much, David. And perhaps before listening to Françoise, we can take a question from someone on the chat, because it's really close to what you just say. What we can do as business to change the mentality that women are naturally not leaders and are weaker than men, which still exists? What do you think?
Are you asking me, Iselis?
Oh no, I was asking
David. Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah,
okay.
or you, Françoise.
No, go ahead, David. I just didn't know.
Yeah, I think so. One of these is a little bit of education, of understanding how these work, and more importantly, not just understanding how biases work, but also to see them, how they play out in action, what they look like, so you can recognize it. And so when I'm on a hiring committee and somebody says, "Yeah, she's not very likable," I can go, "Well, wait a minute. Where was likability in the objective criteria we were evaluating? Or how come we didn't talk about likability for him? Or she sounds like a busy mom." Okay, well, these are things that we can begin to understand how in our language and our behaviors and actions, how these things begin to play out, so that once we can recognize them, now we have to take the next step in calling them out and disrupting. This is disrupting the status quo of what's going on around us, because if we just continue to accept it, it's never going to change things. So part of it is recognizing it and understanding it, and the second part is then figuring out, all right, what kind of action can I take here to stop this, to break the bias?
Thank you very much. And Françoise, in a very famous medium, you said, see people who are for who they are, and not the token you hide them to be. Can you talk to us about that, perhaps?
Yeah. So I do. Yes. I just want to put an image of what David and try to summarize what he said, that I have experienced. If you think about a piano player that can play a full range of music from the high note to the very low notes, the reality is women are confined to the center key. So it's really hard to play a great melody if you are just confined on the center key. So think about the piano analogy. And this manifests many ways. It manifested like, you are too shy, or, women being promoted on achievement, not on potential. Or, there is a great study that was done by a woman out of Microsoft, like over 70% of women in leadership position, their performances, you say they are too aggressive. So allowing a range when you see someone that is not like you, allowing a range of behavior. Now about the token issue is because there is more flashlight on the topic, there are companies that are trying to do the right way. So they say, okay, we are going to get more women, but they do not change their behavior within the company. So it doesn't matter. You can have the most senior woman. If she doesn't have the same leadership ability than a man in this position will have, it doesn't matter you have a woman. So this is what I meant, having the women token. The other thing I talk a little bit about my blog, which is really, really important to understand, is yes, there is this flashlight about let's go and hire more women. There is not the same flashlight of really understanding a career path and progression. And there is not a lot of studies that are done on retention and ability to go up. And I do think that's where it's more subtle, but this is where the really discriminating behavior happen, when you are not giving the same opportunity to develop and grow your career. Because you can also see, there was a study of McKinsey that shows that a lot of women out of college go in at the same position, the speed at which they grow up is very different. And at the end, the pyramid is very skewed toward male. And I do think that's very important to understand. And the things that myself bother me quite a bit is for women to go to the top, honestly, she has to be exceptional, because she has to find a way to actually play just with a center key and be able to overcome a lot of bias, where for men, you have a wide range of people at the top. And I always say, and I know it's kind of provocative, but I would be very happy when I see as many mediocre women in position of power that I see mediocre men in a position of power, because that's for me would be proof of full equality.
Thank you very much, Françoise. We are here to be to say things. So yeah, please, Daniela, what do you think cognitive bias is? Which one is the 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 one we need to fight against?
I don't know. I can say one honestly. I think there are many. And they are, I believe, linked to the fact that there are human beings have kind of a defensive mechanism towards what they don't know very well, they don't know how to handle. So as I said before, everybody prefer to be in the comfort zone, and men prefer to be among themselves, and fight with their or compete with their system of values, which is often different. And the same is true for other type of diversity. And I think, different is difficult, different is wrong, different is bad, different is scary. I think it's just a human, if you want, even natural defensive mechanism. I think it's being conscious. The real challenge is to gain consciousness that the human nature goes towards refusing what is different by nature. Okay, and you need to train yourself, on the other hand, to correct your mind that whatever you don't know and it's scary, I refuse it, better to avoid it, and so on and so forth, rather go into it. How to teach that and how to coach that is really a challenge to me. And I talk to the younger generations, my Gen Z team, in the company, because again, in different parts of the world, you find, even at an early stage of life, very different knowledge of bias. You talk to an Italian young 18 years old, I think they are the best of the world, they dress the best, they eat the best, they are the most attractive. And everything that looks different from them, dress in a different way, it's strange. And if it's strange, maybe scary, maybe I should avoid, same is for leadership style. When you get into company, over and beyond, men and women, because I think honestly you have a different leadership style even among men. So the men that are not too bullish and too assertive, they automatically are interpreted as leading less, but they actually lead in a different way. So I think there is even and for women, we sometimes tend to do the opposite to make sure that we are heard. We become too assertive. And I remember at a point in time in one of these conferences, somebody asked me, is it true that women, to be successful, they need to learn to be assertive? No, I don't think. I think we need to learn to be effective with different leadership styles, and maybe women have tend to be more in the soft style or in the more listening, open-minded than men. But again, even that itself, I mean, the different style of leadership drive to perceptions and bias that if you do this way, or you because you're a B, and if you are that way, you are. And honestly, I don't think it can be attributed to men or to women. I think it's just a bit our nature and the style we feel most comfortable with. So I'm leading a bit into the next question. I think there are in the tips there are training for organization, particularly on learning a bit different style of human beings, of interaction, of our personality and behaviors, which I think it's a good base to start to make sure that because you're different from me, you must be stupid, you must be bad, and try to understand what's good in and how can I get the best out of your style and personality, and you can grow that into leadership style and so on and so forth. So I think it's part of life. I think there are bias, are something maybe we are born or grown up with, and being knowledgeable of this, knowing that we have bias, and probably our first intuitive reaction to something is a natural bias that is not necessarily right, and to control it and make an effort to understand the other person better, maybe it's a good way to start. And but it's a long process. It's for sure more difficult than set pin quotas, as we have done. You said the quota. I mean, that took half an hour. You put 20%, 30% must be women, and it's done. Okay. Now, coaching people to be cognitive of and knowledgeable about human bias, natural bias, and how to correct, I mean, are longer processes. You need to have a lot of energy and patience to continue driving that direction.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Daniela. And in your book, David, you wrote that male allies are the missing piece of the puzzle. So, Françoise, according to you, why are men so important in the fight to gender equity?
Again, I think if you think about equity, I think about inclusion. So if you start by a premise of exclusion, it's not going to work. Again, this argument go both ways, and I think people have to understand this. I think what is very important, and there is just this one point I would like to make, is really understanding the difference as a man of mentorship versus sponsorship. I see many men that are volunteering to mentor women, but then the behavior you have to watch for when the door is closed is how many of these men are actually sponsoring these women. And, in tech, we have this whole process of calibration very often, probably sometimes once a quarter, sometimes twice a year, where we sit in a room and we evaluate the people under you. And I think it's really important to remember people and the men, that they have to be there to sponsor these women. It's so important. And often I see mentorship. I think women are down with mentorship. We are down. Like, we don't need the special education. Like, we are like everybody else. What we need is people that are going to vouch for us when the door is closed and are going, this person is amazing, and we need to give her a chance.
Thank you, Françoise. Daniela, what do you think about the role of men in gender equity?
I think they need to understand that again, if you run a business and if you want the best organization, the best performing, the most effective, but you need to get your talent in each type of diversity, gender and other. You know, in my experience, that is the easiest thing to resonate because they tend to be very pragmatic. So I think when you understand mathematics, that again, if you want to have the high performance organization, you need to fish talent on each type of diversity. Of course, starting with gender, male, female, and more. I repeat it more because honestly, again, since we started working, the meaning of diversity and gender diversity has amplified significantly. And I think that's another challenge that is, okay, I feel now, again, are we still talking about women? I mean, I'm old by now and we're still talking about us. And what about all these other type of gender diversities that have emerged and are now part of the reality that we all live with? So, wow, it's not gonna, could not take us another 30 years to figure out. I mean, we need to go a bit faster because I think those that do not do it, particularly in the business environment, in the organizational development environment, but they're gonna have the lowest performing organization made by all people that look and behave like that. And probably that is not gonna be a high performance organization. I think, you know, sometimes with men, it works better to see the tangible benefit. And then in the process, they learn to appreciate also that, in fact, what drives the beauty of this more diverse organization is the rich content that each diverse personality experience bring to the party. I honestly think that they start getting it more that way when you bring it a bit out of a feminist declaration or any other type of declaration, but really human talent. The beauty and the wealth of the human talent is diverse.
Thank you, Daniela. David, you in a word, and we have so many questions. I see the time. We have a lot of questions. What do you think the role of men, David?
Well, Francoise, I couldn't agree with you more on the topic of sponsorship and advocacy. Got to be one of the top things that we as men have to be doing the same way for women that we do for men. We have to be a raving fan. We got to be talking about them when they're not in the room, making sure we're challenging, providing the same opportunities. And there's a lot here. And there are some things that are holding us back that are bias perception related there as well. But the one message that I think, and maybe this might be a little bit controversial, I don't know, or provocative, but one of the things that Brad and I say that we are never going to get to gender equity unless men step up as being all in equal allies at home. If we don't change things, at home where we're raising children, where we're supporting if you happen to be married for the men out there, married to a woman as a partner, that supporting her career. And we know that, the research has been really clear over the decades that women have done the lion's share of the domestic responsibilities of caregiving and including childcare and for parents, and as well as today, during the pandemic, a lot of homeschooling had gone on as well, and that's been exacerbated through the pandemic. And I would say that the other part of this is really also remembering that part of that, doing that work at home and being an ally is also the emotional cognitive labor of the keeping track of things, the list, all the things that are going on. And if you've ever tried to do it for the men, you realize how much work it is and how distracting it is. It's another full-time job. But if we don't do that for our partners and for women at home, we're never going to get to gender equity when it comes to it at work. And the final part of that is about the next generation, for the kids, our children, for those of you who are parents. When we as dads step up as allies at home, it makes a difference for our kids. And the research shows us that our sons have a more inclusive perspective of what gender roles look like and how we combine those when we get into the workplace. And then for our daughters, they're more likely to persist in their careers, reach their career goals, and then go into more non-traditional professions and industries. So if we're trying to get to gender parity and gender equity, we got to start at home.
Yeah, thank you. Françoise, you wanted to add a word?
Yeah, I just wanted, again, I'm probably the most feminist of the crew. I just wanted to say that it's great. I raised 2 children. My husband, we share half and half, and it was a really 50-50, and I'm very thankful for this. But if this was the only issue, we had a lot of single women at the top of organization, and we don't. So I think the bias are much deeper than just the family conversation, where sometimes we tend to diminish the conversation too. So I just want to make sure we understand it's a broader issue.
Thank you very much, Françoise, to add this point. Perhaps before the last question, I will take one question from the chat, which is interesting. Someone asked, I want my company to get more involved on these topics. Where to start? This is an interesting question. Where to start?
Okay, I can try to answer. It's all depend of where you are in the organization. And the more senior you are, the more you actually can do. So if you have a chance to be in a position of seniority, transparency to me is something that I really cherish. And I think it's one of the best tool to combat bias. So I think I will state my commitment to the issue, and then I will back it up. And I'm an engineer, so I will go and share data with people and really see where you are in this journey. Acknowledging is a journey, but starting with a baseline and starting with goal of retention, promotion are very important to have. So it's all depends where you are. If you are more junior, the things that I didn't do that well, that I will recommend to do, is to really get together with a group of people that actually care about this issue. And again, the more I like the David word of exposure therapy, the more you practice exposure therapy, the better you are for your company in meeting very different people. So again, it all depends what kind of leverage you can have on an organization.
Thank you very much, Françoise. Perhaps another question interesting. We can fight efficiently for gender equity and diversity without counting on quotas and positive discrimination. This is interesting, and I mean the cultural difference between Europe and US is very key on this question. And I know that we have people from Europe, people from US. What do you think? If you want, I can ask with a European vision on that. I think that quota is not very appealing intellectually. You know, it doesn't sound like something really exciting, but at the end of the day, it works. So, I mean, let's be pragmatic. And I know that in Europe, we want to look at being very intelligent and smart, but at some point, we need to succeed and we need to be pragmatic. So, yes, it's not, I would really love to achieve goals without quota, but I think that we need them at some point. So, it will be my European mix, European vision on this question. Perhaps Françoise or David or you want
I
to add?
can chime in. Look, I love quota. I don't think if you don't create mechanism, first of all, I'm an engineer, so if you don't measure it, I don't believe it. So stop there. So not measuring it and staying in the fluffiness doesn't help you. So measuring, it's important. Measuring derivative, which is progress, is also important because otherwise data stagnate at the same level. So I do believe in quota, and I do believe in measuring. I just think that's the way I'm wired.
Thank you. Another question, perhaps from the chat. What could kill diversity in the company?
Bad results. That will take, the issue will go in the back burner very fast. A bad quarter, suddenly you are not hiring any more diversity because you are so eager to hire the next person, and by definition there is more males than female or more diverse candidates. So if you have this sense of urgency because you have a bad quarter, this will take the back issue. I want to share one story that I think it's well known, but I started at Google long time ago where the company had 2,000 people. And I remember, I don't know how I was doing strategy. I got in charge of the hiring process where every week Larry Page were reviewing the resume of all the new people we wanted to hire. If we didn't have 25% of women engineers, it did stop the process. And that was a kill, because when you are in a very high growth company, if a week you cannot hire the next team member, your team will suffer, the company will suffer, your performance will suffer. So it pushed the quota to the extreme limit. Again, Google grew after this. Google is a very different company today. But at the start, there was this really intent. If 25% of the new hire women were not engineers were not women, we will stop hiring.
Very interesting, and thank you. And to conclude, because we are already at the end, it goes too fast. Perhaps if you can share just in one sentence, one concrete, the smartest concrete action to maximize gender equity. Just one idea in one sentence. David, perhaps you start.
Wow, only one. Yeah, I think we've got to start paying attention to what's going on around us and recognize when these biases are playing out and begin to call them out. Again, there's a lot of things holding us back. Bystander paralysis, when we see these things happen or somebody says something and you kind of cringe to yourself and you're like, ooh, that wasn't right, but nobody does anything about it. So fine. And what we recognize is if we do something within about the first 2 or 3 seconds, we just say something, anything at that moment, it breaks that bias for the moment and disrupts what's going on around us so other people see it. And I think that part of this is beginning to recognize what I think everybody sees so that we can all do something about it. And I think that, calling it out and finding some way to do that is really helpful.
Thank you very much, David. Daniela, perhaps one idea, one sentence.
Walk the talk. I think, particularly the younger generation, they're really watching us. As women, more than they watch the men, honestly. And they need role models that they trust. That walk the talk, day in and day out.
Thank you, Daniela. Françoise, to conclude.
Yeah. So I'm going to use what both Daniela and David says, the exposure therapy. Get as much experience as you can with people that are very different from you. I think just by, the more you get to know people, the least this issue will persist. But I also did like the upstander comment. I think also the more you are vocal about this issue, which I not always have done in my career, the better we all will be.
Thank you, Françoise. Be sure we will be vocal, and I'm sure all people that listen to us will be vocal because we need it. We need it in Europe, we need it in the US, and you're right, it's important. And thank you very much, everyone, for your participation. And it was really a very important to me and to all the person in our group. You can see some other webinar, but it's more business oriented. And I know that you have asked a lot of questions and we were not able to answer all of them. We've tried to answer them more we can, but be sure we will if you want to discuss about it, just let us know. I will be happy to, because it's a very important subject and we need to to spend energy on it. So thank you very much, Daniela, Françoise, David, Antoine. It was really an amazing hour with you. Thank you all for being with us, and we let you know to the people who will receive a book, and for the other, please read this book. It gives a lot of ideas. It's really helpful. So thank you, David. It was an honor, and I'm happy to share with people. And Danielle and Françoise, you are amazing role model, and we need more role model like you. So thank you so much. Thank you all. Bye bye.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
having
very
us.
much.